Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Well, it happened. I mean, we all knew it would eventually. European Union, the European Union designated Russia as a terrorist state. Well, as you probably know, there are some hyena states, some bottom-feeding states, which are the ones that stay at the shade of the big lion. To defend them, which are Baltic states, Poland and others. So some of these states, I think in the Baltic states, they already designated Russia as a terrorist state. And what are the implications? I really did not know. I said, well, what the hell they are. Probably they're not going to talk with these guys or going to kick them out from certain kind of organizations and blah, blah, blah. Nevertheless, I have here two articles that explain what it means to be designated a terrorist state. And first, we're going to talk about the European Union. This article comes from the Jerusalem Post. Yes, that's Jerusalem, from the Jewish state. And it's from November 23rd, 2022. European lawmakers declare Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. The European Parliament on Wednesday decided to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, arguing Moscow's military strikes on civilian targets such as energy infrastructure, hospitals, schools and shelters violate international law. The move is largely symbolic for the European Union, though, as the European Union does not have a legal framework in place to back it up. At the same time, the bloc has already slapped unprecedented sanctions on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, and those sanctions could qualify as, consequences for being designated as a state sponsor of terrorism. And now we got the second one, second article coming from the New Voice of Ukraine. And it is from November 23rd, the same, today, 2022. What it means to designate Russia as a sponsor of terrorism and why the USA should take this decisive step. The United States did not take that decisive step again, and you're gonna figure out the reason when these guys explain what that means. State sponsor of terrorism, what garners this status and who grants it? The concept of state sponsor of terrorism is a term used by the US State Department to designate those countries, and I'm quoting, that have repeatedly provided support for acts of international terrorism, end quote. As a rule, the formal decision to recognize a country as a sponsor of terrorism is made by the US Secretary of State, so Blinken or Blinkend. Alright, so this designation means that the US authorities will impose four main categories of sanctions on the state. So, let's see those four categories. Restrictions on aid from the US, including economic aid. Well, Russia did not need that shit. A ban on the export and sale of defense products to the country. Russia doesn't need that. Doesn't fall on that. Additional control measures over the export of dual-use goods. So the transfer of goods between the two, I don't know, there is not much. I don't think they trade much. Various financial and other restrictions. Yeah, they can do something more over there. In addition, if the US designates a country as a sponsor of terrorism, this has a number of other consequences. Sanctions, we are at it, and various measures against these individuals and countries that trade with terrorist state. So, they're gonna sanction other countries that trade with the terrorist state, right? Ending sovereign immunity. You remember Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia with Khashoggi thing? He was just awarded that kind of immunity, or it was claimed that he qualifies because he's a state, not employee, a dignitary of a state. So he falls under that. But he says ending sovereign immunity from representatives of the country sponsoring terrorism. That means Putin and all these guys, nothing. Meaning, for example, that family members of victims of terrorist attacks or attacks perpetrated by the state sponsor of terrorism could use for compensation in US court. So you can go and sue if it's in US court. You file a motion against these guys and they can be sued. It doesn't matter if, I mean, the whole thing is if those guys will say yes, we abide, or we say off, which I think the second option will qualify. A reputation blow to the designated country. Well, I don't think so. In the case of Russia, you already called it that way and isolated it so badly that a lot of countries want to deal with it and go and sign deals with it, with Russia at this moment. Anyway, do you think this guy's gonna say, okay, we're not gonna do it? No, because it's gonna be the next club, the second club. This is the formation of the second club. The first one, United States, plantation master with his bottom-feeding countries, and then you got Russia, China, maybe India, Brazil and all that on the structure of BRICS countries forming the second one. I'm waiting for that. Now, as of 2022, the US lists of state sponsors of terrorism includes 4 countries. Can you guess them? Yes, Cuba, obviously. So Cuba from 1982 to 2015, then removed from the list under Barack Obama, whose administration eased US sanctions against Cuba and returned to the list again in 2021, 8 days before the end of Donald Trump's presidency. So they are DPRK, that's the North Korea, isn't it? In 1988 to 2008, then was excluded after the agreement of the admission of IAEA inspectors to all the nuclear facility declared by the agency and again returned to the list in 2017. Iran since 1984. Syria since 1979. You know, it's another country that's missing here. And these are the 4 countries. Obviously, this is on the US's list, which obviously you're not going to find the 5th one that I'm referring to. And it's in the vicinity of Iran and Syria. No, it's not Iraq. It starts with an... you know what I mean? So that country never sponsored terrorists and all that. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, this is the United States, right? The bully boy of that country. So it says here that at various points this list has also included Iraq, Libya, South Yemen and Sudan, but never that country. Why recent recognition of Russia as a sponsor of terrorism are important for Ukraine? The recognition of Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism is currently the main goal that Ukraine is trying to achieve when it comes to international sanctions pressure on Russia, explained Presidential Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak. He is a kosher guy, remember, appointed by another kosher guy, Zelensky, who was elected, promoted and sponsored by... Anyway, what can you say? President Zelensky has repeatedly called upon the world community to recognize Russia as a sponsor of terrorism. What if they recognize you as a sponsor of terrorism? What are you going to do? Because don't tell me that you did not blow any kindergarten or anything like that, or you didn't commit crimes in a war. That's kind of like impossible, I would say. And now you have that issue on camera with those 10 Russians killed by Ukrainian forces in action. The ones that, you know, they said, oh, we're done, we're not going to fight, and then a guy shows up and they kill the guy and killed everybody else. Now, where would you do that? Don't you dispense past guilt or... So I don't know if you would designate those guys who killed the Ukrainians who killed those 10 Russians who came out of the building and lay on their faces down. And then the crazy guy comes out shooting, they kill that guy and they kill everybody else. Execute. That's a war crime, however you want to take it, because that's collective punishment and they didn't do anything. That guy did, but not them. So I don't know if that falls under a terrorist state or something, but don't tell me these guys did not blow anything that was civilian. Anyway, bring the evidence, right? Put it in court, and let the justice follow its course, and let the chips fall wherever they may fall. So it says here that Zelensky has repeatedly called upon the world community to recognize Russia as a sponsor of terrorism in the context of its countless war crimes, including the killing of civilians and missile attacks on the civilian infrastructure of Ukraine cities. And I'm quoting, "These are not accidental missile strikes on kindergarten, schools, shopping malls, and residential buildings. These are calculated strikes by the occupiers," pure Zelensky said on June 28th. Well, if we pretend to be just, then believe me, there will be a lot of other people and a lot of other countries that could be and should be, would be, ought to be designated as state sponsoring terrorism, and that would be very inconvenient for the exact countries that point fingers. And then anyway, what can you do? If you have the muscles, you have the law in your hands, and you dispense it however you feel it fits to your agenda. Now, if Russia did all what those guys said it did, well, by all means, conduct investigations, find and put the term to the behavior, to the act. But you should not ignore other countries' actions that would fit the same term, which is terrorist. All right, thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.